Streamliner. Sorry, my voice after these days. So low.
Forget what?
Think about how it could be.
A new mindset has arrived, where to share has become our greatest power.
It is this energy that guides us, will enlighten us, where meaning and purpose is a flame.
Burn inside every soul on the planet.
Welcome to the human-to-human model, uniting and inspiring leaders globally.
To build together with meaningfulness and joy.
Opening new possibilities for people.
Anticipating disruption, rethinking society.
Who will reach their potential because the future is today.
Join us to be a sustainable plus 100 world.
And I think right now is clearly the way to act. Lack of clean energy will affect the Earth's core later.
I find that when people begin making small changes, they gradually get bigger because they get this feeling, I am doing something.
So we moved from greed-based civilization to human value-based civilization. Making money is a happiness. Making other people happy is a super happiness.
Wondering about your future? So bring your DNA to us today.
When you are a dreamer, when you are a visionary, of course you have your vision, but there are moments that sometimes maybe you stop believing in this vision, especially in the moments of some problems or failure. So could you tell me, and could you tell also to thousands of people who maybe will be motivated by your answer, what keeps you fighting for your vision? What helps you to reach your dream?
Well, I mean, I think I'm kind of constitutionally just geared to just keep going. I don't know. It's yeah. I mean, it just I don't know. I mean, it certainly there are times when things don't go well, and then that's quite dispiriting for sure. And so then it's difficult to proceed with the same level of enthusiasm. But I do think the things that we're doing are pretty important to the future. And if we don't succeed, then it's not clear what other things would succeed. And if we don't succeed, then we'll be certainly pointed to as a reason why people shouldn't even try for these things. So I think it's important that we do whatever is necessary to keep going.
So thank you, and I wish you that your next birthday is very successful.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think that you understood that the whole concept of the eConvention is to first to unite people around the world with this difficult situation that we are facing right now, to give them hope, but also to help them to still continue business. And I think even more importantly, to think together how we will continue business in the post-COVID decade. And this is one of the topics of our discussion that will be carried on by Dr. Charlie Gay. And I would like to thank you, dear Charlie, for helping us to organize the whole event and to bring such amazing persons from around the world. And let me just, because as always, I forget to put Eike, he's always raising hands, the chair of our conference.
All right. Well, thanks, Thomas. I wanted to just a little bit of the background here is that we have a lot of young folk who have tuned into these sessions from all around the world. And an important part of bringing the leadership together that like we have here today is to offer some ideas for people to take a look at their lives, especially students who may be at a point where they could pivot what they do with their lives and hear from each of us about what we've gotten from the work that we've done over the course of time. All of you come with a background of having spent decades in working in solar and renewables. And at a time like this, having a sense of community, I would argue is just as important, if not more important, than whatever particular technical or development themes we're on. And we do have a whole lot that we share in common that we may not realize. So as part of the introduction of folks here this morning, I'm going to talk about some of the things that each of you have in common that you probably don't know about. So I'm going to start with you, Tom. I've been most impressed by how you've hung on at SunPower through the ups and downs of the organization. I met Tom in 2003 when he came to SunPower. Tom is the CEO and chairman of the board. And he has something in common with Scott Sklar. Scott talks about being president of the Stella Group. Stella, of course, is the name of his daughter, but is also known as Professor Sklar at George Washington University, which happens to be one of the places besides Marquette that Tom went to school. So welcome to you, Tom. Tom also has a background that ranges all the way from startups like 3Com, which we often associate with the Palm Pilot, and large organizations like General Electric and Cypress Semiconductor. Terry Jester, I've known and worked with since 1979. She's the CEO of a startup in an opportunity zone in San Jose called SolPad that integrates equipment and grid services together. She also serves on the advisory board. Most everybody here in this panel not only has a vocation where you're working your day job, but an advocation, spending time contributing back to society. Terry is an advisor to the Energy Policy Institute, to the Quest organization at Arizona State, to Amber Wave, and is unique for having spent a large portion of her career working in Reykjavik, Iceland. She's the only person I know who's worked in Iceland. So has seen both ends of the thermal spectrum here. Terry started her career working with Arco Solar, and as that morphed into Siemens Solar, then to Shell Solar, and then into Solar World with progressive increases in responsibility. And most of those jobs were headquartered in Camarillo. Behind the Ador Lane street address of Arco Solar was Power One Electronics, where Alex Levan had his office. And adjacent to that, Min Lee worked at Vitesse Semiconductor. So within about a 3-block area, 3 of our panelists all worked together in the same location, all without knowing each other or interacting with each other. So kudos to all of you for finding your way together here today. Min is the general manager of the Energy and Environment section of the County of Los Angeles Internal Services Group. I had the honor of following Min in the role of the director at the Solar Office at DOE. And before Min went to the LA County Services area, he worked at the White House in the Obama administration in the Office of Management and Budget as part of the executive services, not only looking at renewables, but also at water-related issues, which are going to become increasingly relevant here as time goes by. I've known Scott probably almost as long as Terry. Scott Sklar started working with Jacob Javits back in, I think, 1970. So spent perhaps 8-9 years working with Javits, was the primary leader of the Solar Industries Association and the Bioenergy Industries Association simultaneously over a period of about 15 years in DC, and has done a lot to help educate the future generations teaching at George Washington University, where he's part of the organization that's called the Environment and Energy Management Institute, basically the director of the Solar Institute at GWU. Alex, I've known from the time that Arco Solar was based in Chatsworth, and Alex started a company called Magnatech, which was one of the first inverter suppliers. He previously worked for Schneider Electric and is somewhat related to Scott because Alex was a professor of electrical engineering at UCLA for quite a long time. Ironically, Bob Wyckoff and folks from the board of directors at Arco made an early investment in Magnatech. And so I got to know Alex while they were carrying out some due diligence on inverters for solar. So Arco had a lot to do with how many of us have come to be here today. Jeff Wolf is the co-founder and CEO at Velas Energy, which is heavily related to electric vehicle charging equipment, was president of the Tritium Party. He has been an active promoter of an organization called Run for Food Bank, which is based in Chico. Chico is a small city roughly halfway between Sacramento and the Oregon border. And Jeff, when it comes to running, Ironman Tom Werner is probably your kindred spirit, if not more than that, in what we have here today. Let me hang on, make sure, did I catch everybody who's on the panel here this morning? We also expected that perhaps a fellow named Steve Milgram would join us. Steve has been an important player in Europe, in Asia. I first met him while he was at a company known today as Hanwha Q Cells, which had acquired Solar One, which had acquired Solar Fun, all of which were at the time based in Shandong, which is just outside of Shanghai. So I had a chance to visit he and his folks there in the factory. And Ike Weber, I'm glad that you can join us. If I remember, Ike has home somewhere near Lake Berryessa up there in the Bay Area, and has been the head of the Fraunhofer Institute for Solar Energy, is our at least bilingual, if not more lingual specialist. He hosted the session 2 sessions ago, auf Deutsch, where the folks from Germany were involved in talking about what kinds of things we ought to be thinking about coming out of the Depression period era that we're entering in here.
Hi, Terry. Good to see you again.
Hi, Ike.
Likewise, I've seen Ike about every day this week, 2 or 3 times every day. So I'm sure he's had enough. We would like to, one of the things I wanted to do was to kind of get to the zen of things. How do we keep the importance of the individual mental health, awareness, flexible mindset, while looking for what it is we can do and mobilize coming out of the pandemic period, and seek to do that collectively on a global basis, at a time where I think most people are going to look to become increasingly self-reliant. How do I take care of myself, my family, get my power, get my water, get my food? How do I maybe connect with my neighbor? How do neighborhoods come together as communities? The dimension that we haven't had be a key part of our past is now going to be a realization that we could grasp and create an opportunity here, I think, so that rather than freezing in the headlights of change, we define where we want to go and just get going as we go there. So each of you give a chance to talk a little bit about how the world looks to you today and what kinds of vision and thoughts you have as we head out. Since I introduced you first, Tom, I suppose it's appropriate that I introduce you first to say some words to us about what your vision is, and we'll go through the panel. Maybe each of you spend 5 minutes or so, whatever you think you might need. So Tom, over to you.
Just unmute, I will.
Must switch on.
Yes, I'm thrilled to qualify to be on this panel. I get to draft off of the accomplishments of many of you. Of course, I've been drafting for 20 years. And hopefully we'll set things up for a larger group of people, a much larger group of people that draft off of our work. There's several interesting with the current pandemic. One could argue that we're working on a much bigger problem, even though the pandemic is phenomenally big. And of course, that's climate change. And so what we're working on has such a greater purpose that I think that this is going to catalyze even more brain power and more capital to move towards renewables, to work on what is at least an equally sized challenge. Also, I had the benefit of a friend sent me Bill Gates' most recent thoughts on the pandemic. And among the things that he says is that you don't know where the next virus will start. So isolationism is the opposite direction we need to go, because we need to work together because we have no idea where the next virus might start. And so the hope is like World War II, where there was international collaboration like NATO, post-World War II, post-COVID, there's hope that we'll actually work more together on bigger challenges. Of course, that leads us to how do we collectively work on climate change, which we know that where I sit, the United States isn't exactly helping. In terms of motivating or some sense of where we're at and where we're going, I think this is super important. And one of the things we're working on in SunPower is, what do you do in the near term given the pandemic? So sort of the tactics in defense, and then what does it look on the other side, and how do you prepare for that so that as a company and as an industry we're better suited to fulfill our mission. And of course, that our biggest mission is to change, what we say at SunPower is to change the way our world is powered. And so I'll end, Charlie, with one of those things is obvious, and that's the virtualization of how you get solar. So how do you do design by yourself? How do you do permitting online? How do you do site survey online? All of those things we're working on so that you can have touchless solar. You can get a solar system on your building, your house, your airport, ground mount system with very, very little interaction. And there's going to be all kinds of innovation that comes out of this. And so painting that new normal and identifying how best to succeed in the new normal, I think, is inspiring and is going to create all kinds of opportunity.
I've been wondering whether or not we could get virtual permits by people using their cell phone video camera to sort of scroll through the installation and and have the inspector stay at home or something along those, or maybe, ping the system from afar so we don't have to require people to move around.
We're working on exactly that. In fact, keep track of things. You'll hear from us soon.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad I came to this meeting. Okay, Terry, over to you.
Well, it's interesting. This pandemic has really created, I think, an opportunity for SoulPad. We're a small company. We're 20 people, and we're in those of you that know me know I love the tech to market challenge of taking something from development to actually selling it. And I like to say I love EBITDA, right? That's success when you're actually making enough money to to book some addition and bring it back to your shareholders. But that being said, I think for us, so we make hardware. We really have worked on load management. We have a load controller that shaves peak demand. Paired with that, we have inverter and batteries and a whole system approach to optimizing customers' use. And what it's really done for us, which I think has been good, is made us step back and look at a really more holistic solution with tweaks on software. And we have a bidirectional inverter that really can go ahead and share energy with other entities. So not just the building that it's on or the house that it's on. And so, being able to offer some additional features, being the little guy, coming in later, there's advantages to that, obviously, because you get to learn what folks have, what gaps people have, and as far as offerings, but also I think you're able to look at it from a little bit different perch. So for us, I think it's been an advantage to kind of step back and look at, as we launch, we're already shipping load controllers. We're gearing up to sell and ship the rest of our hardware this summer. But with a little bit of additional work, we've been able to offer many more features, I think, that will, again, those of you that know me know I'm in this business because I think it's really important for the world to have these kinds of businesses. But I think that we're able to really bring a more holistic solution. The challenge for us is going to be growth, and capital for growth. But I think the silver lining of the pandemic for a company like SoulPad is to really step back and look at what the offering is and be able to optimize it for something bigger and better, if you will.
Excellent. Min, over to you here.
So thank you, Charlie, and thank you, fellow panelist members. I want to kind of take a big picture look at it first. And one of the comments that Charlie made early on in your introduction was a reference to students and young people, potentially entering the clean energy space. And that's a segment of the population I'm actually very concerned about, especially the graduating seniors entering an extremely soft job market. And many of you, may be looking at cuts in your organizations, given, the economic recession that's a result of this crisis. Often lost in all this is not just the people who currently have jobs, but for the graduating seniors who are about to enter the workforce or should be about to enter the workforce. And those students are going to have a really, really difficult time. I've actually been counseling, several, students who have made connections to me over the past couple of weeks, and it's going to be really tough. And so if you have companies that are, can offer internships or offer something that would enable those students who would normally, in a positive environment, job market environment, easily be able to find jobs in our growing industry, they're going to have a particularly challenging time. So that's the first point I'm going to make. And the second point I'm going to make is in the United States here, I think in the last 4 or 5 weeks, about 26 million people filed for unemployment. Okay, when during the Great Recession here in America, I believe that the numbers was around 3.9 million people had filed for unemployment when President Obama took office, in the beginning of his first term. Okay, so there's a very different scale here. The number of people unemployed is much, much higher than the Great Recession. But if you look at the playbook that we had in America during that time period, if you all recall, I know the Recovery Act ARA is a distant memory, but ARA invested roughly $90 billion in clean energy. Okay, $90 billion in the $830 billion Recovery Act was invested in clean tech. A big chunk of that did go to solar, wind, R&D technologies. That resulted just several years later in a job growth of roughly 900,000 jobs in America. Okay, that by 2015. 1 out of roughly 100 new jobs in America was created in the solar industry. And so we have an opportunity here as a sector in clean energy, in solar, in energy storage, in clean transportation to actually help rebuild America. If you look in the playbook of recent memory, it can work. Now, we do need to make those investments. People in Washington, D.C. need to be bold. We need to be brave to make those investments. I haven't seen it so far in the roughly $2 trillion that's been passed as part of the CARES Acts 1, 2, 3, and 4. But during the Recovery Act, 1/8 or 1/9 of the entire funding for ARA was actually in clean energy. Okay, and that's why we were able to drive the industry forward in the U.S. so rapidly, and we helped create jobs, we helped create new opportunities. And so I don't want to lose sight of the necessity for leadership in Washington to help the industry, grow by making the investments and providing the long-term strategy that allows your businesses to take hold.
All righty. Thanks, Ben. It's good to have that perspective from what you've gotten to see over the past decade and a half here. And the situation we're facing now is far more severe than the Recovery Act could cover. Scott, you're unique among all of us here in many ways, but one of the most important ones is using just about every renewable resource there is and using it yourself in your own home and in your office. So I really value the perspective that you can bring, not only from how you put all these pieces together, but how do we get government to be an active participant with us? How do we get government to help us clear away red tape barriers? How do we leverage government investments in a way that helps everybody rather than perhaps a few? So what do you think?
Well, that's a big question. I think when I started in this field in the 70s and worked in the Senate, and we had this oil embargo where the United States never experienced a shortage through effects beyond our control. It was a stunning event, and many of us promoted renewables as a way to counter that and use our domestic resources sustainably. And frankly, we were ridiculed and laughed at. And it took states and local governments like California and others to sort of step up and show it. And then the big policymakers could see that. And when the cellular guys came in and said, we want to have a distributed self-healing network with cell towers, and satellites, they were laughed at and ridiculed. And they started doing it at the local level. And then finally the national players looked at that and eventually embraced it. And then we had the internet guys who were saying the same thing. We're not going to need libraries. We're going to be able to get information on our Dick Tracy wristwatch. And they were ridiculed horribly. And again, local governments and regions did it and changed it. So now frankly, to what Min talked about through the stimulus package in the United States, but we see it in Europe and China and Japan, where governments have stepped in to support distributed energy. And now we're getting into microgrids and smart grids and self-healing grids. I have 2 zero energy buildings where I bring lawmakers in all the time. And what that does is give confidence that these crazy visions that all of us all these faces on this great screen today have put our careers on. So I see this as yin and yang, meaning we need to drive the local governments and to drive these projects and get us cutting edge and integrated. And by the way, I've done great work with SunPower on solar and battery systems, and we're going to do more on microgrid systems soon. And so the fact of the matter is, the more we drive that and then use the media and both the regular media and the social media to amplify it, that in the end is the end game. Because frankly, and again, I've worked at national government, I work with the international agencies all the time, that it doesn't come from the top. It actually does come from the folks that you see on this screen and many, many others. So I really believe we all need to make a concerted effort, not only among the great work we're all doing, but we need to amplify it in a way and in parallel that it becomes totally unavoidable. And I just want to end, because I know we're tight on time here, but the fact of the matter is, because we have these interfacing self-healing grids, communications, internet, and energy, and all of that's impacting, I'm doing projects for healthcare, for hospitals, and these tent city centers, and vaccine refrigeration. I mean, we do have the networked answer, and we do have the tools to have a reliable self-healing set of energy grids worldwide that can frankly take anything that any pandemic or any electrical storm or any tornado or anything else can throw at us if we do this right together. So I'll leave it at that.
I'm interested in, I've been trying to think of a catchphrase, some sort of a hook that we could use that isn't polarizing, like climate change polarizes folks. And my current placeholder, each morning I have a different one, but if I get up 2 mornings in a row and it doesn't change, then maybe it'll be a good one. So the one this morning I've been thinking about is energy security. So no matter what predisposition you may have politically, I haven't heard anybody argue against energy security. And associated with that being the things we need to do, whether it's to address the environment, whether it's to address integrating renewables, and tie that to individual security. The security of, I live in my house, I've got my own electricity, I've got ability to purify water with that electricity, I've got a link, whether it's through a cellular network or tap into Elon's Starlink system that he's launching with low Earth orbit satellites and SpaceX. There'll be an opportunity here for everybody to be self-reliant, sort of Gandhi-like. We'll spin our own wool into thread, and we'll weave the thread into the fabric of something. That the vulnerability of the COVID-19 might be something we could key off of for being able to push our agenda here.
Well, Charlie, I just want to say that resiliency is what's being used in Washington now, and which is slightly misinterpreted from necessarily reliability, but it's all related. Reliability generally a short-term, resiliency is a longer term, but and it all relates to security. So I think you're on the right track, but that word resiliency seems to get around the partisan divide here in the state.
I've seen, every time I ask somebody the definition of resiliency, it covers a huge spectrum of those individual interpretations, all of which we may be able to sync up in some way to bring it together. But I pressed on that while I was at DOE. It actually broke down some of the stovepipes between EERE and the Office of Electricity, but it was hard slogging. Maybe it's we just keep pounding on it and it'll move.
Charlie, one measure of resiliency is, of course, in the electricity grid, the SAIDI index, the Statistical Average Interruption Duration Index, you know, which tells you how many minutes per year per person the electricity grid failed. And what we have as real numbers from Germany is that with the penetration of the grid with renewables and with this awfully fluctuating renewables, the grid had to be strengthened so much and equipped with artificial intelligence nodes, which automatically react to changes, not waiting till somebody picks up the telephone, that in Germany, this index was cut in half when we increased our share of these fluctuating renewables. And I think this really shows that the grid of the future and the energy supply of the future can be much more resilient against all kinds of challenges. Because if you have a PV system where a cloud suddenly cuts out 10 megawatts of electricity, it has to react automatically. It has to reroute energy actually in exactly the same way as the internet. You know, the internet, you don't know how your packages of information go across the globe. And the same happens in a very well-connected electric grid. And I think this is really an advantage of the change to our renewable-based new energy systems.
I love being able to point to numbers and have data.
I sent you the slides. I sent you my slides, yeah.
Okay, thanks. It's a great point. Okay. Alex, over to you.
Well, along the lines that a few of our colleagues discussed earlier, I joined a company that developed a system, artificial intelligence system that can sense. We design hardware for nodes, and then we communicate the data to the centers of utilities, so we can provide higher resiliency and reliability to the grid by the fact that we know the GPS precision, if there is a problem on the grid, up to, our sensor can work up to 1200 kV. So we cover the whole range of distribution and transmission lines. And also it allows very easy integration of renewables into the grid and basically creates virtual utility. You see, with additional DERs, utility of the conventions basically struggling with maintaining efficiency of the central plants. So with a creation of the artificial intelligence that can tie in all of the sources of energy on the same grid, including the storage, including the microgrids that add more security, you can create a virtual utility that both adds resiliency to or reliability to the grid and provides higher efficiency. Higher efficiency because the central plants, they don't have the capability to assess how much energy is supplied by distributed energy resources. So it ties the whole thing into a secure grid operational methodology that provides higher energy efficiency, better reliability, and more of that, better integration of renewables, whether it's wind or solar, into the grid. We have to improve that because more and more DERs are being added, which is good. We have also climatic conditions that are radical, like we have hurricanes and earthquakes, and then we have wildfires, and we have aging infrastructure of the utilities, which all gets to a point that if we want to add security, we have to have a data that demonstrates that one of the segments of our grid failed, we have to reroute the energy to another grid very quickly and reduce the power outages to a minimal. Like Ike mentioned, that is the target, and it's only it will be able to achieve it only if we have a system that senses the grid parameters, communicates to the central control, and ties all of the resources, all of the energy sources to artificial intelligence or big data that we can then manipulate very, very quickly and control automatically.
Who is the customer for this?
The customer could be, depends on where you operate. In many areas, these are utilities. In many areas, some areas it's municipality or utilities that support local grids, like municipality grids. But basically, it's energy providers.
How do you imagine finding your way with this toolkit to the right decision maker within this mix of organizations, some on distribution, some on transmission, the independent system operators, federal government weighing in through FERC and NERC? There's a maze of hurdles here where I believe in your solution. I like the components that are there, figuring out how to change the paradigm or the old guard that has some entrenched interests to be willing to change. What's been your experience there?
Well, I think the regulations have to be adjusted. Regulation not only on the federal level, but also on utility regulatory committees that in each state and each area. So that has to change, and it has to be adjusted to the new reality. So the regulations are very clearly very important. The second one is the mindset of people that run the utilities, that manage the utilities. They have to be more digital than power, okay? Right now, the cadre of people that manage utilities are more oriented into how many kilowatt hours we create, not how many bits and bytes we need to protect this kilowatt hours. And so this kind of mindset has to come with the cadre of young people that bring the digitization into the market of kilowatt hours, okay, which is, and transformers and grids and so on. And the third element, which is not related to regulation, how do we install our nodes in a situation like we have now with the epidemic or pandemic? So we developed a system with drones. We can install the nodes on the power lines using drones, and you can control it from your home. You can sit at home and install the sensors on utility lines and do it in a leisure of your home. So that's what we are pushing now. We're trying to get to the point where we don't have hoists and cranes, and we don't have hot sticks like we used in the past and so on to hang on 1,000 kV lines, sensors that could be very, very critical.
That sounds pretty exciting.
Yes.
Gotta see if we can't infect some of the young students with that excitement and help them displace the old guard.
Yes,
thanks, Alex. Yes. Jeff, over to you this morning.
Thanks, Charlie. It's great to be here with everybody. Yeah, I'm glad Scott mentioned the oil embargo. That was when I was a young teen, and that was my first inspiration into the industry. I built my first solar panel then. It didn't work, but it got me into the industry, I guess. And then, you know, I'm now in this brand new startup. It's so new that we sign incorporation papers on Monday. So it's very, very young and new and exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think, thank you. And, you know, I've pivoted out of the solar industry to some extent into the e-mobility. I did that when, you know, I kind of went through Tritium, which is a global manufacturer of high-speed EV chargers, and became aware of some of the issues of electrifying transportation. So, you know, we're trying to create systems to let us electrify transportation faster by getting over some of the grid problems that exist. And along the way, you know, we have the opportunity to maybe transform the entire electric grid as well, which is the, you know, the kind of challenge I like to take on. No small challenge. Yeah, I think in terms of responding to this pandemic, you know, the group we have here and the group of solar leader and clean tech leaders that we have generally, we tend to be optimistic because if we don't in this business, it's pretty challenging along the way. So you know, we all try and create a new reality, and I think we all have a lot to point to about how we have done that over the time. And these economic or social disruptions tend to accelerate change, and it's really up to us to create the direction we want that change to move in. And you know, not to take joy in what's going on now, but I am truly looking forward to a good stimulus package. Not because I think that clean tech needs stimulus, but I think that America needs spending on infrastructure, and we have drastically underspent infrastructure over the decades. And so, because of you know, so-called austerity policies, which kind of work in reverse, in my opinion. So by unlocking the spigots on infrastructure spending, which is what we are, we are infrastructure. We can actually accelerate what we're doing rapidly. And you know, we're not just highway infrastructure or one purpose infrastructure. You know, Charlie, I think some of the words you might use to motivate and get across the partisan divide, we're not just energy security, we're security. You know, when you say energy security in Houston, Texas, where I live, that means go pump more oil, and that hasn't really brought us a lot of security right now. Houston, I'm not selling my house in Houston for a while, I don't think. So, you know, we need to visualize where we want to go. We need to work very hard and get the right stimulus in for infrastructure. Certainly Veloce Energy, we'll be doing grid edge battery systems to support EV charging. We're going to try and make batteries as easy to deploy as a solar inverter or easier than a standard car charger, despite the new NFPA 855s and such. We're going to overcome all those obstacles and really work to transform our infrastructure into something that's more resilient from an energy point of view, a societal point of view, a security point of view. And meanwhile, as Min was alluding to, you know, we did 900,000 people back to work last time. I think we'll dwarf those numbers this time. We're at a whole different stage of the industry. I think that, you know, we won't do 10x. I don't think we'll get 9 million people back to work, but we will get millions of people back to work in the clean tech industries if we can do this right and drive forward. And so, yeah, in terms of, you know, what I'm personally doing to kind of maintain mental health. I'm not a lifelong runner, but I've become a runner in the last couple of years. And I was planning on, I'm about to enter my 6th decade, and I was planning on doing my first race ever as a birthday present. And that's been canceled. So I created this thing called runforfoodbanks.org to do a virtual race and donate money to food banks. So I have to go out and train so I can do a better time against myself. So, you know, I think it's important that we all keep our mental health and as leaders, not just in the clean tech industry, but actually, you know, we're now leaders in society because clean tech has become so big. We need to be showing care and compassion for our employees, but care and compassion for the broader social community as well. And so my particular thing, not that it needs to be that thing, is you know, people, we don't have a good government safety net, so we need to support the the nonprofit safety nets that we have.
Thank you so much for this words.
Yeah, bravo. Thanks, Jeff. I was thinking as you were describing the virtual race of the 100-year-old guy in the UK who did 100 laps and was trying to raise whatever, maybe $1,200 and ended up with multiple millions of pounds that came in as reinforcement here. So there's at least 4 more decades in front of you that you can look forward to.
I'm hoping to retire.
So, Min, you want to make a comment? Please do.
Yeah. So I want to leverage off what Jeff was just talking about, and in the solar industry, where many of us started or spent a big chunk of our career, or still am in, I think there's certainly a lot of opportunity, and we've seen a lot of opportunity, and there will continue to be a lot of opportunity across the United States, across the globe. I think we collectively have shown that it can be very cost effective. In fact, oftentimes the cheapest form of energy in any given location. But what Jeff did here was actually pivot his career a little bit towards clean transportation. And I actually see that's where there is tremendous opportunity, because clean transportation is really, I would argue, in its infancy. Okay, EV adoption, across the globe is minuscule. Even in California, where we have more than 50% of the EVs, in the United States, it's still fairly modest. And the opportunity to offset the roughly 1 billion gallons of gasoline sold just in California a year would mean an increase in electric load in California of roughly 30 to 50%. Okay, and so we have a tremendous opportunity, and that's where the growth segment, I think, will be, is the intersection of clean transportation, and in California with various regulations. Actually, it's extremely attractive to co-locate and co-site, EV charging stations with solar energy, potentially even with energy storage. And so I see that mix, the intersection of renewable generation with clean transportation, as the uncharted new frontier, if you will. Certainly solar battery storage will move along, but that's where the excitement, I think, is going to be.
Yeah, just one other point I want to make. One of the odd things that this pandemic has done is it's shown us what clean air looks like, and we could describe it scientifically all we wanted to, but people couldn't understand it. And now people visually see it all around the world. It's just staggering. And I think that we talk about, will people go back to buying cars? Will this hurt EVs? Will low oil prices hurt EVs and such? And net, I think people have found out that there are really good reasons to buy EVs that I didn't understand. And that's
I think the other issue here is the dynamic of having technologies that can, as Charlie mentioned earlier, can provide electricity to your home and business, can charge the electric vehicle, not just your home vehicle, but the electric bus at the bus stop, or your cars when they're sitting at work, and at the same time can run and clean either your water or sewage treatment facility or a unit at your house. This idea of multitasking, which of course Alexander raised as well in his presentation, was the fact that we have multiple capacity here to provide several different services either at once, or, as I do at military bases, move it around. So if there's a continuity of operation, a critical function, it can be deployed there, it can be moved there, it can be controlled by the internet there if we want it. And I think this idea that if you're going to spend a very scarce bit of money, it has multiple attributes. And the multiple attributes of not only energy delivery, but loss of pollution, loss of greenhouse gas emissions reductions are also part of this game. And I think we as a group represent that, but how we communicate that to make it more powerful and go, whether it's energy security or resiliency or whatever as the guide word, I think that's our game to capture imagination and actually accelerate movement in this direction.
Alex, you want to speak there?
Yes, I agree with the promotion of clean energy on the basis of results that we see during the coronavirus pandemic. But I think also there is another element that is needed to stimulate growth of new energy and this is the financial community, the banking community. In addition to utilities and the local authorities and regulatory commissions, we need to be paid for what we install, and we need to stimulate the investments that are coming to the markets. So that is the one element that I see even bigger disconnect than the element of governmental control versus the companies and technologies that we develop, is the disconnect with the banking community. They don't see the benefits, immediate benefits or returns on the investments the same way that we calculate them or utility calculate them. So we definitely have a situation where we need to, with discussions like this and publications and conferences, we need to tie in the financial community that can understand the impact of the technology on the weather conditions in the future, but also bring security to the energy delivery systems. And that is the part that I recommend to enhance and promote.
Terry?
Well, I think it's an interesting challenge, all of this sort of concept of energy and distribution and creation being more of a neural network. In a way, to get security, you have to give up a little bit. You know, it's I think this discomfort zone that a lot of sort of policy and rule setting is in is a really difficult thing. Just the banks are one piece of it, but you know, to really create a hardened sort of distributed energy provision system as well as usage system, there has to be security, but in a way, people are unwilling to give up, you know, the security that they feel with what they've had. And so, you know, maybe that is through the seeing of beautiful air in LA. You know, I mean, LA is really my hometown. I look at that, I look at the pictures and I think, my goodness, what a difference. And Houston, I'm guessing is very similar, but it you know, the vehicle to grid energy, you know, all these things are conceptually so amazing, but to get to where people are comfortable with them, I mean, it's sort of solar all over again, right? I mean, it's just in every piece of the value chain.
Tom?
I would just super briefly say to the people entering their careers that might be listening that what you're hearing about is the future, and another phrase we could use is embrace the future. When I started in solar, which is recent compared to some people on the panel, 20 years ago, the entire world market was 2 gigawatts. Today, it's 60 times that. It's working, and we are the future. And what we're talking about here is the future, and you can have a great career and make a huge difference on one of our biggest challenges. So I hear this and I feel optimism.
Well, it was not just only 2 gigawatts. I mean, I started not many years before you, it was 5 gigawatts in the US and started selling solar at $16 a watt cash. So we've come a long ways, Tom. You've been a big part of it. We've come a long ways, yeah. And we've got a lot further to go as well.
For which the solar industry is thankful that Chico was such a good customer paying cash on the barrelhead there. One of the questions I've been thinking about, Jeff, is sort of ties all the way back to Sheikh Yamani saying the Stone Age didn't end for lack of stones and the oil age won't end for lack of oil. In the speed of adoption of electric vehicles coincident with autonomy on the streets, autonomous vehicles, and having it be lower cost to make an electric car, to run an electric car, all of that tends to me to point in the direction of a large shift towards electric vehicles and freeing up that consumption of oil, which is probably, I don't know, a third or so of all of our oil going into that transportation space, and energy efficient buildings probably adds another 20% of improvement there. That the dip to negative pricing on oil might be something that actually persists as we go along here, depending on how fast that transformation could occur. And in the context of electrification of vehicles, I find myself thinking back to, so what was it that made it possible for photovoltaic costs to come down? And while I was at DOE and Mint as well, we supported university professors to write papers, Greg Nemeth, folks at Harvard and MIT as well. And for me, it was all just supply chain, that the scale, having the market made it possible to scale. The scale helped drive down the cost, and that was a virtuous cycle that helped speed up the cost reduction and the deployment at the same time. And I'm interested in the views here of folks about what is the future of oil, and maybe more relevant to what could accelerate renewables is the drop in the cost of battery storage, where the market is there for electrification in a number of areas, but especially with vehicles, and it ties into this smart autonomous energy grid system we're talking about, that I am reminded of every analyst, the US Energy Information Agency, or the generally more thoughtful International Energy Agency's projections. They're always wrong, and they're wrong 1 year to the next. It's not wrong over long periods of time. Our ability to anticipate how fast those changes will occur are largely because they're exponentially driven, and we think in a linear fashion. What do folks on the panel here think about the future of oil and the speed with which storage will fall?
Well, since I do a lot of storage projects around the world, and I also teach courses, 3 courses at GW that include a lot about storage, I guess I'll start. Just say storage is growing exponentially. The technologies we're using today actually will probably not even be around in 15 years. We're in a material science renaissance, and the battery chemistry is moving as fast as the photovoltaics chemistry has moved. And we are just, and then of course, many of you are in smart controls and software and devices, which will also enhance battery applications and life. And we have a lot of technology now that, and some new battery technologies on the market commercialized that can be 95% recycled back into the manufacturing of new batteries. So I believe it's going to have huge applications, and all the studies I've seen from probably the top 8 technology reports, firms that track this stuff are very bullish on batteries in growing at large volumes, both on the grid, at infrastructure sites, and in buildings. So, and of course with vehicles and transportation. So at all levels. And we're going to see a renaissance in storing and moving energy tied to this distributed set of renewables that will feed those batteries, tied to all the smart controls and sensors that a lot of you are involved here on this panel. So it is going to be transforming, and it is sort of the thing we needed as a way to park electrons so we can use them at lowest cost and at highest need. and gives us, of course, the energy security and reliability we also talked about. So that's the nutshell, in a minute that I can do this, of where I think it's going to go.
Let me just comment real quick. So as you talked about the chemistry of solar changing, it was silicon 40 years ago, and it's still silicon. That one of the—
Well, you might be right on that, Charlie, but you're not right on everything that makes that silicon have output. And
I tell you, listen,
we have, so.
Lithium-ion batteries will be still around in 20 years, you know, from our experience with silicon technology.
It's the entrenched incumbent there that gets that supply chain developing, that makes that momentum move. And I've spent, broken my pick a number of times on trying to do different chemistry than silicon, but thank God never let go of silicon. And it gives me the enthusiasm that the battery costs will plummet because of the market, the application space continuing to expand, and the supply chain behind it following along to keep up with it. It makes it difficult for a new player to jump that ever climbing high jump bar that the existing technology has. It's a wonderful kind of learning experience to engage with students on talking about how exciting it is to have the new chemistries, but how daunting it is to be able to push out the old chemistry.
Well, just to be contrarian again, I just have to say, then we'd still be all on lead, but obviously a large part of it is lithium ion. I see aluminum batteries coming in, so I don't necessarily agree with you on that. I think
that's good.
We're going to be very surprised what's popping out the door.
We should not forget one big player, and this is, of course, hydrogen. Hydrogen has been around for 20 years, and there were people like Jeremy Rifkin declaring 20 years ago the century of hydrogen, and he was right, but he was much too early. Hydrogen will have a huge, huge role in our future economy, not only because we can store practically unlimited amount of excess energy in hydrogen, because, when we want to convert our energy system to 80%, 100% renewable, we have to oversize solar and wind by a factor 2 or 3 in order to get around the clock secure electricity supply. And this means that other times we will have enormous amount of surplus electricity. And the surplus electricity, this you can of course convert to hydrogen and then store it in unlimited form, like in the caves where you have natural gas today. And then you can use it back with electrolyzers, or, and this is now getting the most interesting part of the story, hydrogen is needed in enormous amounts for the decarbonization of industry. The reason is that industry like steel industry, concrete industry was based on a chemical reduction process. And the way it was done was you mix it with carbon, and carbon is very eager to pick up the oxygen from minerals and other materials, and therefore you had iron and concrete for building, and you had CO2 emissions. The funny story is that you can do the same chemical process with hydrogen. Hydrogen is as eager to attract the oxygen as carbon is, but the result is not any emission of climate endangering gases, it's water. So what we see is the penetration of green hydrogen into the production process will be an enormous big business coming up. In Germany, they estimated that we have to double our electricity supply, and this all of course has to be green electricity in order to provide enough green hydrogen for production. So I think this is a story which has not yet been widely recognized, but it is starting in Europe. We had a couple of weeks ago in Brussels a whole symposium for almost a day with the Vice President Timmermans about the green hydrogen plan for Europe. So I would like to mentioned this, especially in the United States. I don't know how much initiatives there exist about green hydrogen, but the connection is, of course, green hydrogen makes only sense if it is produced from green electricity. That means from wind and solar. And as a matter of fact, if you go to solar-rich regions, nobody can beat the cost of solar electricity. So at the end of the day, it will be solar electricity going into hydrogen, going into this production process. So hydrogen can solve the storage problems, not for cars, of course. Cars will stay with batteries, and at the moment, these are the lithium-ion batteries. But for the large amounts of excess electricity, which we will get in our energy system of the future, hydrogen is really the big player.
Tom, you've been trying to weigh in here.
Yeah, just briefly, SunPower is a big CNI solar company in America, the biggest, and 1 in 3 customers now buy a battery with their system. And so it's happening. And where they do it, though, to be fair, it's where there are incentives, and there's an application of demand charge management that makes the payback on a battery a couple of years. And a battery lasts 5 times that long. So the math works. And just like solar, when you have an application that works, then you get scale, then you can reinvest and you can get costs down in the supply chain. And I'm in Silicon Valley, and I know several battery startups that are doing incremental improvements on existing chemistries that improve efficiencies by 20, 40, 50%. And it's very analogous to what I saw 17 years ago in solar. So I'm very optimistic the cost of storage comes down with incremental innovation. In parallel, there may be breakthrough. And as that happens, it is obvious that if you store energy, you're going to have software to optimize how to use it. And so the investment in software to have resilient networks and optimized use of energy is a natural byproduct of storage costs coming down. And that's another reason why I'm an optimist and think we're just at the beginning of the energy revolution that started, one of the starts was solar, cost of solar coming down.
Tom, if you had your wish of what government would do here right away, what would you recommend? What are you looking for the government to do?
Yeah, I'm starting to write several op-eds coming a little bit more aggressively because there's a simplified soundbites of solar is subsidized, and of course we know that all energy is in some form regulated, subsidized, and so if we could get past the soundbites and embrace the future. And I think in the near term, the one big challenge is the tax credit is worth a lot less because there's a lot less tax appetite. And so like the Obama administration and Min, thank you for what you were doing, we need to look at making that a grant, and that will stimulate jobs very, very quickly. So in the near term, just a small change in the American tax incentive can make a huge difference for jobs and the future of energy in America.
Actually,
and I would just add, we should try and get storage into that investment tax credit and cash grant. I think the cash grant could really unlock the industry quite a bit, even more than it did last time. I just want to comment too on oil. Your oil question there, Charlie. Yeah, I think we may have actually seen peak oil accidentally. The oil majors are predicting peak oil in between 2026, 2028, depending on who you listen to. And I always assumed that their predictions were a little further than they actually thought because they didn't want to spook the markets against themselves. So if Shell is saying 2026, they're actually thinking 2025, 2024. And so we may have accidentally hit peak oil last year, oddly enough. And one of the things that happens when that happens and oil prices go down, and of course oil prices are only held up by a cartel, a global monopoly, more or less, a global buying antitrust league, right, which the US is about to join potentially. And so if you actually took the price support away, which is what oversupply does effectively, now all of a sudden all these billions and trillions of dollars that invest in oil doesn't have a home, because they have always said, well, we can't make the same returns we're making in oil in renewables, even though historically that was not true. That the thesis was they could make more money in oil and gas than in renewables. Now it's blindingly visible that that's not true. So these trillions of dollars are looking for someplace else to go. They're energy investors, so it makes a lot of sense. So we may see a lot of shift from oil and gas. There's been some in the past, but we may see a lot more shift faster from oil and gas into renewables, because this stuff all needs a home. And so I think we may find some strange bedfellows, which is what usually makes things move forward, in aligning with creating incentive for more renewable production here. And then one last comment on energy storage prices. I'm agnostic as to type, but I did try for about a year to do a modular, small modular factory built concentrating solar power system, oddly enough. And I abandoned that when I figured out that our price of storage using ceramic nuggets for thermal storage was going to come out to about $75 a kilowatt hour. And I didn't think that was low enough to compete with the future of lithium ion in an investor's view. And so I abandoned that, because lithium ion or some further generation of it, and when I say lithium ion, it will be with a different cathode, a different electrode, and a different electrolyte. So, but still maybe use lithium or not. It will get cheaper than that within an investor's horizon.
Good points. Ike, you wanted to weigh in there?
Yeah, I think talking about the investments, I want to mention something which came out as well of discussion in Germany, because everywhere in Germany, in Europe, in the United States, after the crisis, we will see an enormous investment incentive packages being created by the governments, helped by industry. And I think an important factor should not be that all of that should go into solar and wind. Won't happen. And if it is one quarter, that would be nice. But I think a criterion for all stimulus packages should be, how does it affect the global CO2, the climate balance? It has to be sustainable. So we should not allow taxpayers' money to go into industries of the past, fossil, nuclear, coal, whatever industries, which would damage the climate, because now we have reached by chance and by accidents a very good CO2 record. We should channel the investments, and this will be probably $1 trillion packages. We should make as a criterion for those investments, what is the ecological footprint of the investment. And I think in this we could really give the world, the United States, Europe, and so on, a real push in the direction. Because, we have only limited time. We have only till 2030. That's what the climate scientists tell us. And in order to reach this by 2030, we really need disruptive type of processes. And I think the coronavirus might be the disruption we needed. And if we do it right, coming out of this crisis, then it might help to go in the right direction quickly enough.
Tom, you wanted to weigh in, or?
Yeah, I would like to add a point, Charlie.
Go ahead,
Hello?
Alex. Yes.
I would like to add a point, a few points. A few years ago, we ran a model of success for storage as it adds to the grid stability. And it came out to be that any energy source that is below $100 per kilowatt will create panacea for storage. It will really create exponential growth. So any technology that can bring the cost of kilowatt or kilowatt hour to below $100 is very important. Another point is economy of scale. Economy of scale can be achieved with amount like we did in solar. We installed more modules, the price of modules went down. Economy of scale in manufacturing processes and supply chain helped to reduce the cost, and that's the process that will happen in storage. So economy of scale will be achieved if we can combine our industry with another industry, which is electrical vehicle, for instance. That will bring the economy of scale to the dimension that we need to be below $100 per kilowatt. And the last point is the government involvement. In any of the sources of energy, there are chemicals that have to be protected or delivered. Governments have to reach an agreement that no country should control the flow of chemicals that we need for future storage, like lithium. Lithium is a material that we need to get free in the world, not controlled by Europeans, Americans, Chinese, or others, okay? It has to be available to the world at a reasonable market price, not controlled by countries. So I recommend that our government will, or governments will control the flow of special materials that we need for storage in order to make it a viable solution in the future.
All right, well, we're getting close to time to wrap up here. Let me sort of open the floor. Does anybody have any last words you'd like to offer to the young folks listening here today about what kind of a career path they should be looking to?
Well, if I'm a prof, I'll start by just saying I'm very impressed by the students I get, and I both undergraduate and graduate, and I stress to them that don't focus down, focus wide, and meaning that when we're talking renewable energy, it's all the renewables. We're talking about energy storage. We're talking about all the energy storage, hydrogen, batteries, pumped storage. We're talking about energy efficiency. You can't deal with climate if you don't deal with cutting the amount of energy we use or need to use to get the same job done. And then any profession within that field, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's just learning about installing, whether it's the economics, whether it's regulation and policy. So the point being is no matter what you're interested in, you can direct it towards this sustainable future. And I think we ought to, and somebody comes in and says, well, I've come out of the military, or I worked for Walmart on distribution. I go, well, great. This stuff needs to be distributed. This needs the best and the brightest. And if you understand algorithms and approaches to distribution, you can move this field forward. So I guess I again want to emphasize to anybody who's young or wants to do a career change, look wide and broad and figure out how to use your talent or your interest into this field rather than contort the other way around. So I'll end it there.
Yeah, if I could add on from what Scott just said, because I think he's on the mark. First is, we talked about material science bringing the cost of solar down specifically. But I want to remind us that, when I got into the solar industry, it took an hour to wire a panel, and it took an hour to mount a panel. And we had to drill holes in the ground and put concrete in and put a post in to hold the panels up. And when I got out in 2012, it took about 15 seconds to wire a panel and about a minute to mount a panel. And we pounded posts into the ground instead. So there's a lot of construction efficiency and labor efficiency that's come along there to leverage the material efficiency as well. And that's part of what we're working on at Veloce Energy, is bringing that labor efficiency to the ground as well. But then in terms of folks getting into the field, they always said, what should I go into to get into solar or to get into clean tech? And I always said, look, follow your passion. If you have a passion to be an accountant, be an accountant. But do what you need to do to get a job in clean tech someplace. We need passionate clean tech accountants. We need passionate clean tech warehouse folks. We need passionate clean tech engineers. We need, I'm a mechanical engineer. I spend my days doing business management, fundraising, and electrical engineering, with an occasional piece of mechanical thrown in by accident. But I bring a passion to all of that. So it's whatever you need, whatever you want to do, just make a commitment to do it in clean tech. You know, I sacrificed a lot in terms of, you know, earnings over the years at different points in times to get into clean tech and to stay in clean tech. It's paid, you know, tremendous dividends in many ways, but it's bringing that passion. We need that passion to go forward.
Tom?
I would just combine off of the last two comments that I think the talent is moving to our field, and the advice is great. I would say get an internship or get involved and do some work so you can iterate and find your passion. And across all the fields of financial engineering in clean tech is so deep and so rich, and the hard sciences are critical to make the advances that we've talked about. So one way to find your passion, because when I was leaving school, I had no idea what my passion was. Well, I didn't have a specific idea. So get out and get involved in trial and error or close, and you'll find your passion. And you're going into the place where the future is. So the old proverbial skate to where the pick your money or future is going to be, you're going to make the right call if you come into this field.
Min.
Yeah, before I make some remarks about the students, I do want to point out, and Tom just mentioned it, which is the financial engineering necessary, especially post-COVID response. You know, at least certainly in the United States, and I'm sure around the world, the economic fallout of this crisis is very severe. And coming from the perspective of a local government, and I'm sure, and this is also true at the state level in the United States, there will be extreme budget pressures. So many of the sustainability, environmental, climate change related initiatives are going to be, you know, like across the board, very constrained with capital. And so financial engineering has an opportunity to convert something that, you know, we kind of did on the side, or, you know, if there were extra resources, to something that you can convert that to something that is a very viable business proposition. And so, you know, I believe that's going to be true of local governments, you know, utilizing, you know, PPA structures, ESPCs, ESAs, you know, that will be extremely important. And I can only imagine that in the private sector, you know, they're facing similar constraints in terms of capital and directing their capital towards mission critical business functions that, you know, is their business. So the financial engineering part, I think, is going to be extremely important moving forward. You know, for the students out there, I echo what all the other speakers said, which is really, you know, follow what you believe in. And I would add to that is make your voice heard, okay? Especially for the students, you're the next generation. Your voice is not just important in terms of, you know, directing you and where you want to go in your career, but also you can help institute change politically. And I think, you know, you see that, you know, as a groundswell in the United States, but leverage that and push your elected officials to do what is in the best for your future. Okay, I'll end there.
Terry.
Charlie, I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for inviting me to be part of this panel, because it's an amazing set of opinions and thoughts that are coming forward. I think it's for young people, choosing something that you can have a tremendous amount of personal challenge, but also personal pride. You know, there's always been a piece of me that is incredibly proud to say I'm working in energy and working in new energy. And I think that that's fulfilling in many ways. And it helps drive you at times when, you know, you get up in the morning and think, oh my gosh, I'm facing this insurmountable challenge and rolling this, you know, rock uphill. But I think that challenge and pride go together, right? You just feel like you can really contribute in some way. It seems small some days, but all those small things add up to a big thing, you know? And I think that, I think everybody on this panel can agree that starting off, I'm not sure we all knew where this would head. In fact, there are many years, I remember working with Dick in the early days, we'd kind of think, is anybody ever going to care about any of this? But we still believed in it, wanted to do it, you know? And so I think it's, that part is tough to put in words, you know, just there's this immense personal pride that comes with it too.
Well, let me wrap things up here. I share a small story that you inspired me to remember here. About 10 years ago, set up a R&D center in Xi'an, China, where we put in pilot lines for our customers to come and try out the equipment set for manufacturing of crystalline silicon. And one day we, excuse me, had invited Condoleezza Rice, who at the time was Secretary of State, to come and visit the R&D center. We had about close to 150 employees, pretty much 50-50 men and women. And one of the employees asked Condoleezza, what would you recommend a woman do in order to be successful like you have been? And she said spontaneously on the spot, I'm going to respond, but it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. The first thing is to find your passion, find something that you love to do. And the second thing is to work your ass off, but it's not really going to be work because it's what you love to do. And the third thing she said was find a mentor. Everybody here on this panel would be great at mentoring. Besides being my old cronies, each of you has the ability to contribute hugely to those students who are looking for some feedback, some guidance here on what's that landscape look like to help clear the haze, to not only see the mountains, but to see options for what their futures are. So I want to thank you all for taking the time from your busy schedules. I know you are very disciplined and I've already run over here for 3 or so minutes, but I want to wrap it up. I want to thank you, Thomas and Eike, for hosting this day in and day out over the past week. I'm envious of all of the insights you got to share because I wasn't interested to get up at 1 in the morning to find out what the Australians were thinking. But all of these have been recorded. They'll be on YouTube and undoubtedly there for posterity. So thank you again. We'll close off here. Thomas, if you want to say something to wrap it up?
Yes, actually, because you see, like we always say that everything that we achieve is thanks to the united DNA. And we have a few of the people who, because, you know, I would never make it, I would never start it if not the people who are with us. Let me just upgrade a few people, okay? For the final,
Yeah, please.
Yes. I'm upgrading Cornelius.
Raji, hi.
Dave.
Hello.
Some of
Hi,
you,
Raji.
You know, because these people also
Anis.
Contributed to the whole event. Where's Paulette?
Okay, Amis.
Cornelius.
Hi, Anis.
And Paulette. And
Dave.
Zineb, can you share?
Hi, Dave.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Where is Zineb? Zineb, Simei. And Simei, please. You see, actually, now you can see why we are so successful. Yes, if there is such a big team.
Hi, Zineb.
Hi, hello, everybody.
Hi, Zineb.
Hi, Rashid.
Hello, everybody.
Again,
Hello. I really enjoyed
okay,
it.
I think that I didn't forget anybody. So because you see, I was sleeping this week maybe in average 2 hours a day. And then one night with Eike when we are so tired but you know, my throat is already amazing. So we are sick, you know, we are sick, and with Eike and Tomasz, how we survive? I say, Eike, you know, because we have all this DNA of all the people who are with us, yes? And it was first point. Second point is that every second of our life, it's a contribution for the better world, you know? So even if you are tired, I mean, like really exhausted, but you know that every second that you put, it makes sense. And I would like to ask you also, the new people who joined us, that you don't leave us after this call. I know you are busy, but when we start actions next week, I would like also that you stay with us. And this would be, so now it's recorded. So if you say yes,
Yeah, you have
and trust me, this the miracles will happen. I know we have a lot of problems now, yes, and maybe these problems will continue during certain period. But if we unite our forces, the miracles will happen. And Russia, I think she can confirm. No, I said Russia, and last days miracles were happening. Yes.
Yes.
I just want to say quickly to Charlie, first of all, thanks for organizing this great session, and thank you to all the speakers. And also, I just want to show Charlie what I have in my bookcase. This is a photo Charlie took of me almost 19 years ago in a remote village in Tibet when Charlie was working on Green Star.
Dave and I were in Tibet on 9/11. So we spent about 2 weeks finding our way from Tibet back to the US.
Yeah. But there were no planes. You had to wait till the planes continues to fly again.
It was practice for this event here, where it's going to be a long time before planes are flying.
Exactly.
I cycled across Tibet in '98. It's my favorite country. Amazing.
Yes, it's an amazing country.
Yes.
So I would like to ask just one sentence. So how do you imagine? Well, first, do you agree? Because we discussed that we set up as our deadline for changing of the world's paradigm 2030. Yes. So this is emergency, but also this is something which will happen. Yes. Like we discussed with Tony Siba like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Do we agree on this?
Yes.
Yes.
We agree on this.
We agree. Oh, many thumbs up.
So let's everybody thumbs up for 2030 deadline.
Yes.
But of course, also
Right,
agree. Yes?
That's by cutting the red tape.
Yes. Now red tape. Get the scissors.
There you go.
So anybody would like to add something at the end?
It can be done. We have the money. We have the technologies. We know the problem. So why don't we do it?
Exactly.
Here, here.
Yes. Here.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I would just like to add, together we are stronger. And when we say we have to do it, it's the time now that we do it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Here,
Be
here.
safe, be impactful.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Charlie. Thank you all the participants.
Thank you, guys.
Keep in contact.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
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 Bye-bye.